Thief 2: The Metal Age is a direct sequel to The Dark Project, in more ways than one. It plays the exact same way as its predecessor with mostly the same stylistic choices. You use a lot of the same gadgets and it only has minor graphical improvements. Still, it manages to rise well above its predecessor. This comes from the levels themselves. This game's focus is solely on stealth. There are no supernatural adventure levels, only dark, tense stealth. You're back in Garrett's shoes. After the events of the previous game, he has returned to normalcy, at least what he would call normal. You roam the dark, claustrophobic streets of the city as a new threat rises. First, let's look back on last time. 1998's Thief: The Dark Project revolutionized the stealth genre. It introduced a complex system that took sound and visibility into account, making for a tough challenge. The game's experimental features were very well received, but it fell flat when it leaned on the established video game tropes of the time. The game was two-faced. In it, we played as a cynical, self-centered thief named Garrett that gets tricked by a deity appropriately named the Trickster, who steals his eye to perform a ritual which will allow him to subdue the world. Garrett ends up tricking him, but in the end he still shows his cynical nature by turning his back on the Keepers when they need him. Now let's talk about the Metal Age. Looking Glass began developing the game in February 1999. They took the fan feedback to heart and decided to scale back the adventure levels in favor of stealth. In the early months, the team regularly gathered to watch films with a similar aesthetic to what Steve Purcell, the project director, had in mind. They wrote the story in a 3-act structure where Garrett slowly developed from his self-centered personality to a James Bond-like character. On May 7th, 1999, Looking Glass signed a 4-game deal with their publisher Eidos. The game was announced on E3 1999. The tech demo that was displayed attracted quite a few onlookers and a small crowd gathered. As July came, they began working on the levels themselves. They needed to come up with new level concepts as they felt that relying too much on Thief 1 stealth levels would get stale and boring really quickly. They diversified the objectives of the missions. Instead of stealing all the time, you would eavesdrop, kidnap, or blackmail. The team ended up just making levels that they thought were awesome and then writing the story around that. This ended up being a difficult task. They wanted to implement a co-op feature into the game where you would play levels as a team. But in October 1999, this was scrapped because the studio didn't have enough resources to make a stable multiplayer while also being able to deliver a great single-player experience, which was their priority. In January 2000, they announced that a multiplayer Thief game would be released shortly after Thief 2. However, as the development continued, history repeated itself. They ran into some serious financial trouble again. Eidos was writing them a new check every week because the studio would spend the money almost immediately. Eidos stepped their foot down and said they weren't allowed to miss their deadline even by a day. Despite this, morale stayed high during the entire development of this game. Employees would sleep in the office during the final month. They were able to finish before the deadline. Thief 2: The Metal Age was released on March 24th, 2000. The game had a great reception. Reviewers stated that it was Thief 1 without the annoying stuff. If you liked the first game, you're gonna love this one. I have to agree on that. I enjoyed this game much more than the previous, and I loved the first Thief game. It sold way better than its predecessor and was seen as a huge commercial win for the companies involved. Despite this, Looking Glass Studios had to close their doors for good in May 2000 because of royalty delays. Without further ado, let's jump into the game itself. Like in the previous game, we read a short extract before every mission. Here we read from the Metal Age Chronicle. It says that wisdom comes from figuring yourself out. Now we are introduced to this mission. An old associate of Garrett named Basso wants to marry Lady Rumford's maid, Genevieve, but Lady Rumford doesn't want it to interfere with Genevieve's service contract, so she is keeping her locked away in the manor. You have to go clear a path so Basso can get to Genevieve and break her out. You're not allowed to murder either. Now why would Garrett do such a thing? Not because he cares about Basso or Genevieve, but because Lady Rumford is well off, so there's a lot of valuables for Garrett to take. Also, Basso would owe him a favor, so yeah, Garrett is just as egotistical as he was in the first game. You spawn outside the manor. As someone who thoroughly enjoyed the first game, the darkness is a welcome sight. The atmosphere of the previous game persists. This is also the tutorial level. They have the route Basso is going to take marked so you know exactly where to go. These red pop-ups appear where they show you how to play the game. You can walk straight through the side door. You get into the butler's quarters. It's a very nice room. After looting it, you get out into the basement hallways. They're filthy and dimly lit. You can creep past this guard post after dousing the torch. You evade some more guards and you get to Genevieve's door. Now feel free to explore the mansion and take every valuable you find laying around. Once you're done, head out the side door again and whistle for Basso. He runs with you inside and you get Genevieve out. That's it for the first mission. This mission really is just for new players to learn the game and for experienced players to refamiliarize themselves with how the game works. The atmosphere is dark and tense and you almost feel at home. This mission has no plot relevance outside just being a prologue/tutorial mission. In the opening text to this mission, we hear a prayer from a faction called the Mechanists. We have yet to find out who they really are. Newly elected Sheriff Truart is making Garrett's life difficult on top of that. Garrett once again needs rent. He decides to raid the Rampone warehouse in the Docks district. This district has many different businesses that houses different kinds of valuables, including an underground smuggling ring. You have to break into office building A and then steal the loot required for Garrett's rent. You start out by these crates. Here by the start you can overhear the conversation between a hammer and this guy. Here we hear who the Mechanists are. They are Hammer separatists who left to start their own religion after the whole Trickster ordeal. The Mechanists and their new technological advancements thrive, but the Hammer's numbers are dwindling and they are suffering. We also hear about Karis, who is their prophet. He is currently rewriting a lot of the Hammer's holy scripture. This map is very scarcely populated. This makes it very easy to move around. Getting into the offices of Building A is really easy. You can walk straight to the roof and then plop down from an open window. In here we can read the instructions to the key panels that we can use to open the different storage units. It is a Mechanist invention. Now you just gotta go around and snatch the loot needed. There is this ship that you can break into. Here we see a new element added to the game, secrets. They are hidden areas of the map that contains loot or equipment. After getting the required loot, you just head back to where you started and the mission is over. This mission was really simple, just like the last. It didn't hold your hand or anything, but it had few and easy objectives. The map was easy to navigate and practically no guards. I did enjoy it, however. We hear from Karis' sermon. He says like shaping metal, you must strike with force to shape a man. Garrett gets an unusual visitor who needs help. Garrett begins interrogating him, but the man shows him the stacks, so Garrett, being Garrett, is suddenly able to listen. He wants Garrett to sneak into Shoalsgate Station and frame a Lieutenant Hagen for robbing the evidence vault. He gives you everything you need. You spawn by a utility building where you can use the drain pipe to enter the station unnoticed. Now this is relatively simple. You just put an item from Hagen's office into the vault and then put the strongbox in his office. You emerge in the basement where you begin to make your way upstairs. You can find a lab and a morgue down here. Why a police station would need a morgue, I don't know. In this mission, you're only allowed to knock out 5 guards, so you have to do what the thief community calls ghosting. Leave as little trace of your presence as possible, so you can knock out guards or throw things around and that. The atmosphere here is just incredible. The music is tense and you can hear the guards go about their patrol. The first floor looks mostly like the basement with all the cobblestone. The second floor, however, looks pretty damn good, almost modern. They do manage to maintain the atmosphere despite the drastic environmental shift. You get to this hallway where a single guard is patrolling. I knocked this guy out, but there is a second guard patrolling at the end, and Hagen's office is over there, so watch out. In one of the offices here, you find a journal entry where the writer and Lieutenant Mosley is suspicious of Lieutenant Hagen's involvement in some illegitimate business at Madame Valari's brothel. You can find another journal entry that says that they are now after fences instead of thieves so that they can run them out of business. You find the vault key in the office across from Hagen's, along with a journal entry about how Lieutenant Mosley's plants all die. She is fed up with Hagen's New Age nonsense and wants some normalcy back. You take a handkerchief from Hagen's office and read the diary. He writes about his loyalty to Truard, and we also hear of the pagans, who we'll get to know later. After that, we head up to the 3rd floor where we meet a new enemy, the camera. If this thing looks at you long enough, it will sound the alarm and send every guard your way. You can find the code to the vault room in the secure records room. Now all that's left is unlocking the door, dropping the handkerchief, and bringing the strongbox to Hagen's office. After doing that, you can leave the way you came. I like this mission. Here we can see how they sort of worked around the whole redundancy issue they had. They limit you to only 5 knockouts, so you have to move in and out with minimal fuss. Before this mission, we get a pagan saying. It seems to be about greed and corruption. In this mission, Garrett went to meet a man named Sammy about dropping off some loot. He gets ambushed by some officers that try to kill him. He was sold out by Sammy, it seems. Now you gotta flee the scene and get back home. I love this level. We spend its entirety out on the streets of the city. You can enter and loot quite a few of the buildings. The level is open with a simple objective. This makes you feel so free. When you arrive at Garrett's place, it's being heavily guarded. You have to sneak in, get your gear, and take shelter by Shale Bridge. It's quite hard to reach, honestly. When you get there, you get this cutscene where we see Garrett polish his new mechanical eye as one of the keepers try to convince him to come back. It takes some convincing, but Garrett eventually agrees to follow. He follows 3 keepers to hear the prophecy of the Metal Age. Now is a good time to explain what the Metal Age actually is, because it's not as sick as it sounds. The Metal Age follows the death of the Trickster. The Builder and the Trickster represent the constant fight between order and chaos. Without the Trickster, everything goes a little too far towards order. That's where the Mechanists come in. Their extremist views and desire to replace biology with mechanics will pollute and destroy the world they live in. The Keepers need to restore the balance, and they need Garrett's help. But Garrett, being Garrett, wants no part of it, much to the displeasure of the Keepers. But one of them goes after him. He hands him a letter to help Garrett take care of his little problem with Truard, saying that Garrett can help them sooner, but Garrett simply says don't count on it. Like I said, this is one of my favorite missions in the game. It's the first time we really get to roam the city and look around. Its dark and gloomy atmosphere keeps the moment tense though, as guards patrol the whole city to find you. Great mission. We read from the Chronicle of the First Age. It says that the best knowledge is that which only you possess. The letter that Garrett received says that he has to listen in on a meeting happening at a mechanist seminary. That's what you gotta do. And take some loot with you, of course. The map marks where you have to be to hear the meeting. This is another great looking level. It suits the mechanist's motive with everything looking so artificial. While listening in on the meeting, you find out that Truard is in league with the mechanists. You also hear of a key to a deposit box that is in the west tower of the castle. You need to make a wax impression so you can make a copy of the key. Traversing the castle isn't exactly hard. You get the key and now you have to make it to the workshop to make the wax mold. To do that, you have to go through the catacombs. This is the first time you meet something supernatural in this game. Down here, some haunts are patrolling. There are guards as well, but once again, not the hardest part of this game. After that, you just get out, and that's that for this mission. This is a very, I guess, standard thief level. It's dark, you have patrolling guards, and a nice open area to roam. Once again, the diversity and objectives do keep this game interesting. I remember looking at the map for quite a while, trying to think of where I could find wax to make the key impression. First, we read from an inkgrass scroll. It speaks of how the elements have been trapped by artificial means. The mechanists have recorded their meeting with Truard and dropped it off in the deposit box. Now we gotta head to the bank and use the fake key to enter the box and steal the recording so we can put some pressure on Truard. But it's not going to be easy. First you gotta figure out which box belongs to the mechanists. Getting into the bank is actually pretty tricky. All the doors are locked and can't be lockpicked. You have to climb to the roof and enter there. I was gonna go across these beams, but I struggled with it quite a bit, but eventually I got to the other side. The Hall of Records was like right across this room, and here we see that box 11 belongs to the mechanists. Now we gotta get to the vault. As you begin traversing the bank properly, you meet a new enemy, the mechanist robots. There are the small worker bots which only alert the others when they spot you, but then there's the large combat bots which shoots cannonballs at you. They can only be defeated with explosives or water arrows to the red pack on their backs. 1 for the small ones and 2 for the big ones. Finally, after making it through the well-guarded bank, you make it to the vault. But once again, it's not that simple. The vaults are composed of multiple levels and that each have their fair share of cameras. It's quite tricky ascending to Vault 11 through those. But you do it, and now all you have to do is leave, and after that the mission is over. I really like this level. I think they pull off those infiltrating a mansion castle missions the best. The level design is just splendid, there's not much to complain about. The new enemies provide a fresh challenge, and as always, the atmosphere is just awesome. Even though they've gone for a more real visual style, I think the darkness of the level and the absurdness of the new enemies maintains that dreamlike quality that gave the previous game so much character and made it stand out so much. We read more from the Metal Age Chronicle. It speaks of the trickiness of manipulating someone. Now with this recording, it's time to go confront Truard in person and figure out who hired him to kill Garrett. Your first order of business is figuring out how you're even gonna get into Truard's estate. You have to get up here to open the gate. This proves a bit of a challenge since there are guards and cameras. Now you just sneak around the back to get in. The design of this place is just a standard manner, but they use colors to make it look more interesting, like this purple hallway. Right here it occurred to me how even though Thief 1 and 2 run on the same engine with the same assets with almost no visual improvements, it's still pretty easy to tell them apart by looking on the design choices themselves. The Dark Project really leaned into the absurd, whereas this game has a more subtle but still dreamy feel to it. Eventually, you get to this rec room. I struggled a bit with this part. It's pretty well lit, and that tiny worker bot is sweeping every area. Throughout this level, you unlock doors with these metal gears. The last door requires one too, but there is seemingly none left. Then you find this note from someone who accidentally left their gear in the pool. You go get it, and you can enter the final floor. When you get there, a grim surprise awaits. Truard has been assassinated, and the guards are now on high alert. You have to find evidence that can point you in the direction of who did it. By the murder scene, you find Officer Mosley's keyring. Now we know who did it. After that, you just get out and the mission is done. This level is close to being my favorite. The plot thickens and the level itself is incredibly well designed. It's everything Thief is good at. Dark, gloomy atmosphere and tense stealth. Then again, it doesn't really bring anything new to the table either. That was a really great thing about the Dark Project. Almost every mission brought something new. We get another Karras sermon. Garrett has been shadowing Mosley a lot after the Truard incident. She has an alibi for the murder, but she definitely has something to do with it. This is a stalking mission. Mosley has left at a suspicious time with a suspicious letter. You gotta follow the letter. Now we're back on the streets of the city and it's really cool. Just like the ambush mission, it's dark and lonely on the street. Eventually you get to this part with the bridge. Here I made a mistake that is apparently very common for people playing this game for the first time. Your objective is to follow the letter, not Mosley. Right here she drops it off, so if you keep following her, you're gonna fail. You have to stand by it and wait until someone comes to pick it up. Eventually this man in dirty clothes comes and picks it up. This is one of the pagans. They are a new faction introduced in this game. They are a naturalist faction that represent the forces of nature and chaos. You follow the pagan to the cemetery where he is ambushed and wounded by mechanists. He flees into the graveyard and now you gotta follow him. You just have to follow the blood trail to this portal and the mission ends. This mission is really just there to further the plot. It does offer a bit of a break from the gameplay loop by having you shadow someone instead of burglary. Other than a great setting, there's not really much worth noting.
Gathering place, quickly now.
Now you have to follow the blood trail through the pagans' landscape so you can get the letter. Now you're in the realm of the pagans. As you move through the environment, you see the destruction that the mechanists have brought upon them. They've been massacred. Some of the absurdism of the previous game makes a very welcome return here. It's not to the same extent, but still very cool. You move through these tree huts where you encounter these monkey men that I think are pagans. The mechanists roam here too. When you make it to the end, you get a cutscene. Garrett is still in the forest. The trees begin to move and transform and you hear the reverse speech again. My first thought here was, is the trickster back? It's not him, but his little companion Victoria. She wants to join forces with Garrett to fight the mechanists. Garrett doesn't want to, which enrages Victoria, but she quickly calms down again. She explains that the mechanists are after them both and they are stronger together. She has agents everywhere in the city, but things are not going very well. She makes an oath that will curse her if broken. Garrett ends up agreeing and she makes him take the same oath to ensure that they are allies now. After that, the mission is over. Now this is probably my favorite mission in the whole game. It's awesome. Everything from the design to the atmosphere, it just works. Victoria found out that Karras is rewriting Holy Scripture and we need to get into a place called Angel Watch, which is the Mechanist HQ, to see what he is trying to achieve with this. Garrett is not happy with this plan, but after Victoria goes after his ego, he agrees. Security will be extra high because of a party that is taking place at the same time. You are to go over the city's rooftops to get access to Angel Watch. On top of reading the new scripture, you have to find information on a Cetus project and learn why Karis is throwing the party. You spawn in a bell tower and begin going across the rooftops. We see the city during the day. The pollution of the industrialization leaves it in a thick fog. This fog makes sure that the city still feels claustrophobic even up here. You can enter various buildings around town where you can find loot, gear, so on and so forth. Eventually you come across these 4 archers having an argument.
You gone too far this time, you camel-man and tunic-wearing mollycoddle!
It escalates and they open fire on each other, leaving only one alive, which makes this much easier. You go through this woman's home and on the other side you can reach Angel Watch. Garrett is very unimpressed with the tower's security so far. You climb in through these vents where I just made it straight to the 5th floor to get to Kara's office. This would prove to be a bit of a mistake later. After locating the office, you need the key. A woman on the 6th floor has it. You follow her to the stairs where it's lights out and you can take it. In here, you can listen to this recording where Karis reveals that he knew Garrett would be at Angel Watch and that's why Karis isn't here. He didn't show up to his own party. You have to disable the alarms in the janitor's closet so you can push this button under Karis' desk. It opens a painting where you can find some schematics about the Cetus project, where we find out that it's taking place on Markham's Isle and is led by a man named Cavador. Now to the part that made me realize I screwed up a bit. Karis isn't present, but he made some recordings that are scattered around the map. They speak of different exhibits in the tower. You have to listen to all of them. I had to work through the whole tower and had a bit of a problem finding them. You find Karis' scripture in this safe. Reading the scripture, Karis' plan becomes clear. He basically wants to subdue the city to make them his servants. Now you have to go back across the rooftops to the bell tower where the level ends. Like I said, this level is probably my favorite. Traversing the rooftops was fun and a nice change of scenery. Angel Watch itself is very well designed. It has a lot of diversity in its environment, from the clean, sterile look of the upper floors to the cobblestone of the lower. Sneaking through the party on the 6th floor was also a really tense and cool moment. In this mission we go to Markham's Isle. We are to kidnap Brother Cavador, who is the head of Project Cetus. On the island you have to try and find Victoria's agent Lotus, because he might have some useful information, but she hasn't heard from him in months. You start by having to move up this little underground complex. It's pretty tricky, there are cameras and it's pretty well lit. Eventually you make it up through this well. You are now on the island. The island is dark and foggy. It feels very desolate. It brings a feeling of isolation and remoteness that you're just out on this island alone against the mechanists. Atop the lighthouse you can steal the key to the coal storage. It's in here that you find Lotus. He's been trapped in the freezing cold and is close to death. He tells you that the Cetus project is a kind of submarine called Cetus Amicus. You have to go down there and try to find Cavador. Karis relies heavily on his ingenuity, so with him out of the picture, the mechanists would be crippled. He gives you a way down to the submarine. It's in the lighthouse where you can get down to the project. Cavador is not present. Then he asks you to kill him, for he is already close. You need to find a place to hide on the Cetus Amicus to get to him. The boat itself is really cool. It really has that steampunk charm by being almost cartoonish. It's just awesome. The place itself is really cool. It reminds me a bit of Break from Crackscleft Prison with the whole underground complex thing. Inside the flooded quarters you'll find more of Karis' new scripture. He writes of a substance that can turn anything biological into rust. Below one of the sites, you can find the key for storage locker 5 on the ship. In there, you can hide. After that, the mission ends. I enjoyed this mission quite a bit. We've spent a lot of time in the city so far, and Markham's Isle offers a nice change in scenery. It comes with almost an industrial atmosphere with the steampunk elements, the fog, and the whole underground workstation. Now we have to see where Cetus Amicus takes us.
Not a single beast.
Good riddance, then. Noxious thing.
The Cetus Amicus takes you to a secret mechanist site where you'll hopefully be able to get Brother Cavador. As you leave the boat, you recognize where you are. You're in the Lost City. This is where we got the Fire Talisman in the first game. This mission is actually pretty simple. You have to enter the KD site where you can find Cavador. To do that, however, you have to sneak inside this building. The movement lights make a return. Now you have to search the various sites for Cavador. He is constantly on the move, and you have to look for a green light to know where he is. This area is heavily guarded. I did something really dumb here. I found the green light, and I proceeded to knock him out. As I got to the exit at Site 9, however, nothing happened. First I thought I wasn't doing it correctly or that the mission was bugged. Then I took a closer look at the screen. This isn't Cavador, it's just some random guy. I shit you not, I walked around with him for like 20 minutes before I realized the error. I finally found Cavador and was able to escape with him. This level is pretty damn hard. Definitely the first time I got genuinely frustrated while playing these games. Because of the high security, not because I mistook Cavador for a random guy. It's a fairly short mission as well, for thief standards. It was great to return to a location we know from the previous game. It helps tie the two games together because I feel that the Metal Age and the Dark Project has a very different feel to one another. Victoria gets Cavador to speak. He has to deliver some masks and a device called a cultivator. Now we have to infiltrate the mansion of a man named Bram Gervasius to get a mask and a cultivator. Gervasius is planning an exhibition where they will be on display. There is a private section on the 3rd floor, but the entrance to that floor remains hidden. You now have to sneak in to find it so you can come back and take it when the merchandise arrives. You are not allowed to be detected or knock anyone out in this mission. This is another level I really enjoyed. Immediately as you spawn in, that lovely thief atmosphere hits you and it's just awesome. In this level, you should also take the time to really get a lay of the land before the next mission. It's composed of a great hall and some surrounding hallways. These hallways have few patrolling guards but many cameras. Luckily, you can shut them off by the control panels. Alternatively, you can use these hidden corridors to get around undetected. The first thing I did here was actually going to the library. In here, a ghost patrols and it will kill you if you get spotted. You have to figure out what the hell happened here and why these ghosts are roaming. You do this by reading 5 books that you can find here. In the first one, we hear from a man named Giles writing to a woman named Lorna about a new job. Someone named Ashton will replace him here in Gervasius Manor. In the next one, we find out that Giles and Lorna are having an affair behind her husband's back. You can find this secret doorway by pulling the next book, where you find 2 corpses, presumably Lorna and Giles. In the next book, we find a letter from Lorna. She says that she will leave Ashton, her husband, the one that will take care of the library after Giles leaves. Then her and Giles can get married and be together, but she says they have to move away since Ashton will never leave them in peace. In the next letter, Lorna writes of a close call with Ashton, but he didn't find anything. She can't wait to divorce him and marry Giles. After that, the ghost vanishes. After that, we get a letter from Karis. He can't wait to see the cultivator and mask. But we're gonna steal them though. I think we can assume that the bodies were Giles and Lorna and the ghost patrolling is Ashton. The whole library segment is just awesome. Moving through the darkness while listening to the ghost wander around with that horrible noise. To find the secret stairs to the 3rd floor, you have to find a cuckoo mechanism from a toolbox and use it on this clock on the 2nd floor. After that, you just have to leave. Leaving was pretty tense for me. I ended up just climbing over this guard and breaking the window to get out. After that, the mission is over. Like I said, I love this mission. The atmosphere is great, and that library segment was literally and figuratively haunting. By disallowing any kind of violence, the devs make you have to memorize the patrols and camera locations so you can slip through. This is another great level. Now that you've scouted the place, it's time to get your hands on that cultivator and the mask. While we were in Gervasius Manor, Karis has begun modifying the Mechanist Cathedral. For what purpose, we don't know for sure yet. This is the penultimate mission. As well as the targets, you gotta take 1400 loot with you. You can knock out guards now. This mission really isn't the hardest. You just gotta get to the 3rd floor where you can find the items. The cultivator is easy to find, but the mask is a bit tricky. The carpet of the showroom is booby-trapped, so when you step on it, toxic gas fills the room. Now you gotta get a bit creative. I went up on the roof beams and slowly lowered down on a vine to grab the mask. Now you just gotta scavenge the lower floors for the loot and the mission is over. Like I said, this is really not the most complex thief mission, but it is challenging and good fun. Karis' plan has been revealed. He has placed the cultivator in the masks of all servants and put them in many houses throughout the city. He will then have them release rust gas, which consumes all organic matter, which is the substance that we read about in some of Karis' scripture. The gas will kill everyone and everything, and Karis will be able to have his world of pure machinery. He has locked himself in Soulforge, which is an airtight cathedral. Victoria suggests that Garrett breaks into Soulforge and makes a guiding beacon to leave all the servants back into the cathedral, where Karis will basically destroy himself because Victoria has covered the cathedral in vines. Garrett says it's suicide, but when he hears that Victoria has assaulted the cathedral by herself, he decides to go. She sacrifices herself, covering the whole cathedral in vines. Karis knows you're there, but he doesn't know what you're up to. The cathedral is dark and empty. It has a very lonely, isolated atmosphere, with the stone walls that coats everything in grey. You have to move around, making the various components for the guiding beacon. Eventually, you can put it together. After putting it in place, you have to go around and switch the signal towers to B. This part is pretty tense. A lot of guards roam in the areas that you cross while doing this. After that, you just gotta leave and the mission is over. Then we get this cutscene where Karis slowly realizes that he's been outwitted by the master thief. Then we cut to Garrett speaking to one of the keepers. He realizes that they were right and that all is as written in their books. Garrett asks to know more and the game ends. Thief: The Metal Age is the perfect stealth game in my eyes. Looking Glass took the feedback to heart, learned where their strengths are, and made a strong second entry into their IP. This game is challenging and fun. Practically the entire game consists of open levels that give you a lot of freedom when it comes to completing your objectives. It's everything that made the previous game great, but even better and without the annoying parts. They build on their formula all the way through. Every level feels unique and brings a new twist into the mix. Whether it's shadowing mostly through the darkened streets or breaking into a high security manor without being able to take on any of the guards. The game stays fresh all the way through. Once again, the atmosphere is just incredible. The main theme in this game is environmentalism and the era of playing God. The atmosphere in this game suits that very well. The constant fog when outside mixed with the rusty cogs and machines makes everything feel industrial and artificial, like there's no soul in the city. The themes of this game are obviously most apparent in the story itself. It features Karras, a man that sees himself as a prophet whose mission it is to replace humans with machines, hearts with circuit boards, and flesh with steel. He twists the deity's words to suit his own narrative. His delusions of grandeur ends up interfering with the delicate harmony between cosmos and chaos. This brings his inevitable demise. Like the keepers say, all is as written. We also see Garrett develop as a person. He starts as the same self-centered thief we know from the previous game. He plays a big role in saving the city, but he wants no part in it as he doesn't see a benefit from it. In the end, he realizes that he has to play his role in the Keeper's prophecy. He ends up fully working with the Keepers again. This game is just lovely. But that was it for this video, and please like and subscribe. Bye.